excited to come to you today to talk about something that comes up very frequently with clients, and that's the tough conversations that we as leaders need to have. So, we're going to spend some time talking about that today because it comes up, whether you think about it or not. My guess is you're having these tough conversations certainly every week, maybe even every day. And so spending a little bit of time thinking about it can make them more effective. And all of this goes to not just how you lead your business, but it's who you are as a leader and the leadership legacy, the leadership impact that you make. I mean, we are, called to lead through complexity. It's what we do. If it was simple, it would be boring and you wouldn't want to do it. So we got to take on the complexity. And one of the most challenging parts of that can be mastering these tough conversations. I mean, if you're preparing for a presentation, you know what you're going to say. You know what slides you're going to use. You know what your key points are. You know what you want your takeaway to be. You're kind of in control of how that goes. But when you're having a tough conversation, you're only in control of half of it, and sometimes not even that. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know how they're going to take it. You don't know what their perspective is until you sit down and have the conversation. But the more prepared you are, and the more that you've thought about it, the more you can almost like lay a framework for yourself for how these things go. So it might not be easy, but it certainly will be easier. You'll be better prepared. It'll be just more, it'll feel more natural to you. And it definitely will be more effective. And this is true whether you're talking about a tough conversation with someone on your team, whether you're having to deal with challenges with peers, or maybe it's even dealing with something with your boss, if it's advocating for yourself or your team, or talking about, a tough sales cycle or whatever that is. These skills will apply to you for any of those conversations. It's about how you show up. Keep in mind, again, these things are rarely comfortable. And in some ways, the objective isn't to make them comfortable. It's just to make them effective, because having these effective conversations really does build clarity. It builds trust and it drives progress, which is why you're doing what you're doing. So let's just dive in and talk about some tips for how you can make these conversations easier and more effective. So the first one just really goes to preparation. Get grounded in what's the purpose of this conversation. What does a successful outcome look like? It might be delivering constructive feedback. It might be renegotiating terms of some sort of an agreement. But think about what this successful outcome looks like. You have a specific goal, but think about what you want the outcome to be for them too. Even, it may be as loose, nebulous as them feeling good and respected and understanding clearly what the outcome and the next steps are, even if it's not the way they would have designed it. Sometimes these tough conversations walk away with both of you feeling a win, and sometimes not, but they can always walk away being heard, feeling heard and respected. Before you enter the conversation, as part of your preparation, you want to ask yourself a couple of questions. What's the purpose of the conversation? Set the expectations for yourself. Is it to provide that corrective feedback? Is it to ask for something you need? Also, run it through a filter of what outcome do you want and what outcome do you want them to have. Ideally, you're creating a situation where both people walk away feeling it's very constructive, but it's worth thinking about what is the outcome you want. And you can think about it two ways. It might be the outcome I want is for them to agree that they're going to deliver XYZ by this date. It could be that specific. Or it might be a little bit looser, like the outcome that you want is to walk away with clear understanding on both sides. And, the result of the project, something that will help lead to, whatever the bigger thing is that you're going for. So just get clear on what's the outcome that you're looking for. This one's great. In preparation for the meeting, try and think through what facts do you know and what assumptions you're making. And one of those assumptions might be, how do you think the other person is going to experience this conversation, whether it's a subordinate, a peer, or a boss? Sometimes we go into it with the energy, that is almost geared up for a fight or geared up for something that's really contentious because we assume that they're going to be angry or hurt or confused or whatever it is. So it's really important to separate out what facts you really know about the situation with what assumptions that you're making. Another way to prepare for these conversations is to get clear on what are your key points. Maybe it's even some phrases that you want to have sort of prepared so that you can stay really clear and really respectful. And then you want to prepare for what are the next steps you'll propose to close effectively. Now, sometimes that might be, you might have something very specific that you need, or it might be, um, you might be, you might want to be prepared that a next step might be, let's, take a pause and think about this and regroup later in the day or tomorrow or whatever. Or you might want to ask them to go away and think about their action plan and bring it back to you. So the next steps could look a couple of different ways depending on how the conversation goes, but you want to make sure you're closing with them. So those are some thoughts for preparing for the meeting. Some other things to think about as you're both preparing for it and facilitating the meeting is, how are you going to manage your own emotions? You want to keep an eye on them. It's not that you want to, be robotic and not have emotions. Sometimes you have feelings about what's going on. You might get frustrated. You might be confused. There's a lot of different ways that this can go. And we all have our own techniques for sort of regulating ourselves. I mean, for me, when I'm sensing some sort of an emotional response, an easy way that I deal with it is just to pause for a minute and take a deep breath. That sort of connects me back to the moment, and I can think about what's the energy that I want to be bringing to the conversation. So, whatever technique works for you, have it in your back pocket so that you can, you know, be human about it, have whatever emotion it is, but that doesn't mean you need to respond or react emotionally. Another thing to think about in having these conversations, and I absolutely love this point, start from a place of curiosity, not judgment. And so it's really important to ask some questions and make sure you're understanding their perspective, why they did what they did. This always leads to a better place. It always leads to greater understanding. You might not end up in a place of greater alignment, but you will understand why they approached it the way they did. What where were expectations misaligned, that kind of thing. So curiosity will always lead you to a better place. You may end up in a place that can feel like judgment. Okay, now that I understand all of this, yeah, they were still wrong. That can happen. You get caught up then. The curiosity still serves you well in understanding where they're coming from and setting the stage for you to land the message in a more effective way. Excuse me. Another thing that's really important to think about in having these conversations is adapting to your audience. So you tailor your approach based on who you're speaking to. And some ways to think about that. I sort of broke down the possibilities as it's almost like 360. It's a subordinate, it's peers, it's your boss. Those are three good categories. So thinking about adapting to your audience, if you're dealing with a subordinate or someone on your team, really what you need to bring to that conversation is clarity and empathy. And a great way to approach it is to make sure that you're setting clear expectations for the discussion, that you're very focused on behaviors and not character. It's not personal. It's what behaviors did you observe? And then make sure you're linking that feedback to growth and development so they can really aspire to take it on and sort of be better for it. If this tough conversation is with a peer, what's really needed there is collaboration and respect. Sometimes a peer, I think, it may be the hardest. But if you're acknowledging their perspective, if you're really seeking to come to shared goals and make sure that you're both clear on that, and setting boundaries firmly but constructively, you can really get to a good place with both of you feeling, respected, heard, and more productive as a result of it. The third level of conversation you want to be thinking about and preparing for is dealing with your boss. And adapting to that dynamic really takes, you want to have a focus of alignment and solutions. And so approaching that, you really want to be concise. Most bosses don't want you to go into a whole story. They want to know the facts. They want you to be data driven to make sure that you have data to back up whatever your assumption is. You may want to spend a little bit of time anticipating what questions they have. So again, you can have the data and you've sort of thought through what the possibilities are. If they come up with something you didn't expect, that's fine. You work through it, but anticipating what those questions may be not only helps you be better prepared, helps you get kind of into their mindset a little bit. And you always, always, always want to be connecting your message to the business priorities. So whatever it is you're bringing to your boss, the thread through that problem to delivering on and growing business is very, very clear. Okay, so you've sort of adapted to your audience. Another point to keep in mind with these conversations is you want to deliver your feedback with clarity and care. So you definitely want to be focusing on behaviors, not character. You want to frame your feedback as the opportunity for growth, as we talked about. You want to be very clear. You want to make sure you use examples, because if somebody's delivering tough feedback, that might be a question. Can you give me an example of when that was observed? It will help it land. It will help them to really understand the message. You also want to make sure you hear their perspective. They may be seeing it differently. They may have intended a certain thing that didn't land the way they meant for it to. So hearing where they started can help you understand that and help lead them along so that they can deliver the performance or the message in a different way next time. Again, it goes to that curiosity and learning where they're coming from. And you want to discuss the impact. They may have intended one thing, but if it didn't land a certain way, them understanding what the impact of their behavior was can really help them to formulate a different plan going through, for the next time, and help them really understand why it's even an issue. Another thing that's important to do if you are having a tough conversation is separate facts from stories. It's not just important with your boss, but really overall, you want to make sure you're distinguishing what really happened from what is your or others' interpretation of what happened. It's two very different things. And, someone may interpret behavior a certain way and it may be true for them, but that may actually not be what happened. So it's important to get to the bottom of that. And, you want to frame this up going into the discussion, but it also helps you to address the issues that come up on the fly. Something may come up, use your curiosity there, tease it out, make sure you're understanding not just the story, but what the actual facts were. And something that's always really important is acknowledge the human side. You always want to be professional in these situations, but you want to bring your empathy. Sometimes listening is one of the most powerful things that you can do in showing commitment and caring to a person. But your boundaries are important here too, because you want to be careful that it doesn't turn into an unproductive venting session, because sometimes you are not helping them. You might think you're helping them by listening to that, but you got to cut it off and redirect the conversation sometimes to a path that has a more productive way forward, next steps, that kind of thing. So you're hearing them, but that doesn't mean they get to take up all of your time with something that's just not productive. And in the end, what you always want to do with any conversation is make sure you're closing with next steps. You might want to summarize agreements and understanding. You definitely want to clarify responsibilities, and you want to set follow ups or a specific action plan, and you want to come back to it. If this is the only time you have this conversation and there's no additional feedback on, did you see things getting better? Did you see the same behavior happening again? Whatever it is, whatever evidence comes to you as a result of the conversation, circle back with that feedback as well. That's the only way it really, has staying power. So, lots of thoughts around managing tough conversations. The goal isn't to make them easy, it's to make them effective. So, really by preparing with clarity, managing yourself, your own reactions and emotions, and then engaging others always with respect, you really do build stronger relationships, increase trust, and move your business forward, which is why you came to work in the morning. And the more you practice these skills, the more natural that they'll come to you, the more impact that they'll have. And, leadership is not measured by avoiding discomfort, but by taking it on with confidence, with purpose, with an eye towards growth. And that is how we grow towards leaders. Uh, that is how we grow as leaders and make the impact that we're working towards. So thanks so much for joining today or listening later. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what questions you have, what you agree with, what you disagree with. And if you want to talk more, feel free to be in touch. Thanks.